anything that you feel like you don't have enough of. You feel like you don't have enough money or enough time or enough of something. That scarcity mentality throws your brain into a threat mode. And right now we're all suffering from this scarcity mentality around certainty about the future. Every plan we've made for the future has exploded. And we feel a scarcity there. The human brain evolved to really pay attention to scarcity, because if you didn't have enough water, you would die. If you were without other people, you would die. It's an evolutionary thing to keep us alive. But a hyper focus on scarcity doesn't work in the same way. It doesn't help us in the same way as it did 10,000 years ago or more. So the practice of gratitude can really help our brains shift out of scarcity towards the perception of abundance.
Have you ever wondered what it feels like to have a full plate and empty life? Hello, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. This is Nishant, and welcome to the Nishant Garg Show. This is a podcast about helping you live a fulfilled life, and my job on this show is to invite the world-class experts to extract the practices, routines, and habits to help you live a fulfilled and abundant life. Today's guest is Kristen Carter. Kristen is an author, speaker, and coach. Her books include The New Adolescence, Raising Happy and Successful Teens in an Age of Anxiety and Distraction, The Sweet Spot, How to Accomplish More by Doing Less, and Raising Happiness, 10 Simple Steps for More Joyful Kids and Happier Parents. Kristen is a sociologist and senior fellow at UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center. She draws on the latest scientific research in psychology, sociology, and neuroscience to help her clients lead their most meaningful, joyful, and productive lives. She lives with her husband, 4 teenagers, and dog Buster in California. Without further ado, please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Kristen. Kristen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, and I'm going to have this wonderful conversation with you regarding happiness and much more. I'm sure that our listeners will learn so many things about elevating our happiness in our life. So I was thinking if you could start with your children. How would your children describe what you do for a living?
Funny that you should ask. I've got 4 of them. They are 19, 20. Well, actually, they're 17, 18, 19, and 20 right now. And 3 of them are here with me. You know, school is a little upside down. So it's been fun having them home more for me, and not at all fun for them, I think, because they're all at the age where they just want to be away from home right now. And I'm a sociologist and a senior fellow at UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center. I'm an author and a writer and a coach, and I used to be a speaker before the pandemic. And I am actually still doing some speaking, but I study the sociology of happiness and well-being, and I'm doing a lot of work right now about uncertainty and helping people cope with uncertainty, as that relates to what we're all going through these days and to our well-being.
How are you dealing with uncertainty in your personal life these days?
Well, I have learned a lot about uncertainty over the years. I kind of feel like I've been in training for my whole career for this. So one of the things, well, there's a couple of important things to know about uncertainty. The first thing is that the human brain perceives ambiguity about the future or uncertainty as a threat. And so it's very, very stressful for us. There's research that shows that people experience more physiological stress just being uncertain about their job, being unsure whether or not they're going to lose their job, than after they actually lose their job. So our drive to create control and certainty related to the future, to make the future predictable, is a primary drive, same as a drive towards food or sex or any of the other primary survival type drives. So that's the first thing to know. The second thing to know is that it's better not to create certainty. Like that, I can say like uncertainty is a real threat. When we're living through times of incredible uncertainty, the best plan is actually not to try and control things, not to try and create certainty in the future, because it doesn't work. And because the opposite of uncertainty isn't actually certainty, it's presence.
Could you give us an example from your life when you were trying to control things and it didn't work out?
Yes, I can. I could give you any number of examples. Well, so the first thing is that, right, like we're in close quarters here, lots of kids. We actually had over the summer an international student that was living with us and a 20-something neighbor that was living with us. Like there's just a lot of people in my household. And so I just basically went through a phase where I was trying to control everyone, right? Like I was literally trying to control where people put things. Like I organized the pantry and then became like obsessively controlling about where people put things away to not like mess everything up. Like the way that I deal with chaos is through organization, and organization works fine. It's when you try and control other people that everything backfires. Things get more chaotic when people feel forced to do things your way.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I was just trying to create predictability for myself, right? I want to be able to, find the rice when I need the rice. And, so that was an example of me going for trying to create certainty and predictability in a way that harmed my relationships. Let's just put it that way.
Yes, and this is very common human behavior. We all want to take control on things most of the time. So
yeah.
What would be those practices to really cultivate letting go of things that we can't control in our life, Kristen?
Yeah. So the first thing is to just really pay attention to what's actually happening in the present. So if the opposite of uncertainty is not certainty, but presence, then paying attention to what's happening right now in our immediate environment and in our bodies is a way to calm our nervous system and to ironically feel more grounded. So every time I wash my hands, for example, now that we're so much more aware of washing our hands. So throughout the day, every time I wash my hands, I'll just check in with myself. And I kind of ask myself, I'm like, all right, so how are you feeling? Right? So I'm feeling the water running on my hands, but I'm also checking in with me about my emotions, because when we have a lot of stressors in our environment, and, emotional reactions that are to those stressors, if we try and suppress our emotions, we tend to become very unfocused. It actually measurably affects our cognitive ability and our ability to concentrate. So just using that sort of a dozen times a day, checking in, what is it that I'm feeling? Just trying to label my emotions it's a really solid science-based practice for calming the nervous system, feeling more grounded, that enables us to then go about the day. I think a lot of times we don't check in with our emotions when we're in these very emotionally difficult circumstances because we're afraid that the sadness will just take over. And, occasionally, Friday I had one of those days where I was like, wow, I just need to sort of like lay down and cry for a second, right? That does happen during these difficult times. But for the most part, a dozen times a day, I can just touch in to a sense of sadness or frustration or whatever other challenging emotion. And it might be, there's positive emotions that come up too, right? And we don't need to worry that the negative emotions are going to take over our lives.
Would you mind talking a little bit about what happened on Friday?
Yeah, I was really, really trying so hard to focus on something that I had not been able to finish all week. And so like my frustration level was really high. And so I basically did a complete shutdown where I sent a text to everyone in my household. I'm going on Do Not Disturb. The only person who can interrupt me during this was my son, because he needed help with something related to a college thing. And so I just needed, like he basically could break through my texts. And so I'm focusing, and he broke through with Ruth Bader Ginsburg has died. And I just I was not able to, like, I tried to just suppress it, right? Like be like, okay, I'm going to put that news on hold for another hour and finish what I'm going to do. And then I just couldn't, I just couldn't do it. So I just had to I literally laid my head down on my desk and cried.
Thanks for being very open, Kristen. How do you set these boundaries with your kids and your loved ones? Setting boundaries are difficult in our lives, and what you're saying is clear, healthy boundaries.
Yeah, it's hard, right? And it's probably the most important thing. Like, this is the thing that I work the most with my coaching clients on, of all sorts. I have such a wide range of coaching clients, from, executives to stay-at-home parents. And no matter who you are, in my experience, most people need practice setting boundaries and setting them in a way that doesn't alienate other people. Some people are really good boundary setters, but they need help doing it in a way that doesn't push others away. And other people just can't keep the boundaries. So the important practice is to identify what you need, and then expect to fill the need yourself. Right? Not expect other people to hold the boundary for you. They won't. And living in tight quarters, in families, other people get in habits with us. We get in patterns of behavior with other people. And so we can expect that we will need to set boundaries again and again and again and again. And this is the practice, right? Eventually people get into new habits. It does happen, but it's not an instant thing. It's kind of iterative. So we have to, be really, really clear what we need. And then we need to, sort of set the boundary and set the boundary and set it again and again and again, especially when the boundary doesn't appear to serve other people in the way that our lack of boundaries did. A lot of people will want us to change back to the person that was so much more immediately helpful. But, I found in my family, and I've seen this again and again with my clients, that when our irritability goes down and our patience goes up, people the whole family can relax into the boundaries, right? That when we stay in integrity to ourselves and we keep ourselves grounded and balanced, the household runs smoother. Our teams at work run smoother. Nobody likes to have somebody who's irritated with them. And the boundary settings really helps entire organizations, or, and by organization, I sometimes just mean the family. It helps them run more smoothly and more harmoniously.
Kristen, how do you stay grounded in any conflict? And you have mentioned about being grounded a couple of times. Is it any kind of a mindfulness?
Yeah, I'm a meditator and an exerciser. I will say, just to humanize this, that I had great routines before the pandemic. And then all of my routines just completely fell apart so hard and fast with the initial lockdown. And now here we are, 6 or 7 months later, and I've rebuilt all of my routines completely from scratch. The routines that keep me grounded look very different now than they did beforehand. And I think that this is important. Now, it's exercise, and I'm a big proponent of really moving your body 6 or 7 days a week. I try and do aerobic exercise as often as I can, but at least 3 times a week, because that really helps our bodies recover from stress. I do yoga 2 or 3 times a week, and I meditate once or twice a day. I do transcendental meditation. So those are my practices. I also get 8 hours of sleep. Like I'm really serious about my sleep. My whole family thinks I'm ridiculous, but I can't, I'm really sensitive and really emotional, and I can't function in these difficult circumstances. I can't continue to be productive and like not cry every day if I'm underslept. I'm a little bit like a toddler. And the thing is that I know I've seen the research. Most people are actually like me. They just aren't quite as emotional, right? But in terms of overall functioning, most people need 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Most adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep at night. So that's how I stay grounded.
You have a meditation practice, you have movement exercises, and you sleep 8 hours. How do you balance your life? You are a super mom. You are doing so many things.
I know, and I'm working full time. I just have like my sleep and yoga and exercise and meditation. These are the foundation for me. Like those are the big things that I always do first. And so a lot of that will literally happen first thing in the morning, right? Like I wake up and I meditate and then I exercise. So I will get it in first thing.
So what time do you wake up in the morning?
5.
5.
I know it's too early for people, right? So maybe 5:30. Well, I wake up at 5 and then I'll meditate until 5:30. So that's sort of like I literally just sit up in bed. So it kind of that first meditation sort of blends into that. But that's why my family thinks I'm so ridiculous, because I really am like getting ready for bed at like 8:00, and I like to read for an hour before bed, and I will go to sleep at 9.
So when you wake up in the morning, how many minutes do you spend in your meditation?
20 minutes.
Is it any kind of guided meditation, or what kind of meditation is that?
No, I do transcendental meditation. So I was trained in transcendental meditation as a teenager, and I've tried every kind of meditation that there is. And the reason that I always come back to TM is that it's a real, for high achievers, I think it's good because there's an effortlessness about it. The mantra just sort of helps me not try. I'm always having to try not to try at these things. And for me, meditation is an important element of it, is the effortlessness of it, that it's like I'm not pushing myself to focus more. So that for me is what works the best.
Do you have a favorite mantra?
I do. In Transcendental Meditation, they give you a mantra that is a secret, so I'm not going to tell you. But everybody gets their own personality.
And you mentioned that you go to bed at 9:30, and you start getting ready to go to bed at 8:00, and then you read. So what kind of books do you prefer to read before going to bed?
Oh my gosh, I am all over the place. So I probably read 3 books a week, but I like to listen to fiction while I'm out walking and cleaning up the kitchen and things like that. And then in the morning, I like to read nonfiction that's related to whatever I'm working on, that's more like research. And so then at night, it's like, if there's something from the day that I just really want to get back to, or if there's just sort of like health for me is kind of a habit, is kind of a hobby. And so like I read lots of books about health and food, and it sounds so boring. I know I sound really boring, but I love books about nutrition and stuff like that. I read a wide range of things.
Could you recommend some of the books that have inspired you the most in your life?
Oh, some of the books that have inspired me the most in my life. A lot of spiritual books. I think about like Byron Katie's Loving What Is has influenced me for many, many years. I, for a long time, worked with Martha Beck and her books. She's a coach, And also she's trained as a sociologist. So I relate to her, and her books have really inspired me. But I'm just, a big fan of reading fiction too, and using fiction in order to understand the world and empathize and release emotion. I just finished a book called Circe by Madeline Miller and learned all about Greek mythology about that. But it was a novel that was really engrossing. I'm reading Sue Monk Kidd's new book, The Book of Longings, which is really delightful. I really am a huge fan of reading novels that take place in times and eras that we don't live in now, or have narrators that are from different walks of life.
I'm curious to ask you that, is there anything that, or some of the things that you might have learned from fictional books and that literally you have copy pasted in your life, you have implemented that in your life to make it better?
I'm sure the answer is yes. I think that the answer is yes. And it's not something I've done really consciously. Right. So I couldn't, certainly consciously from nonfiction, right? Like any book about habits, I've copy and pasted elements of it to get into new habits or nutrition or whatever. But I think the fiction books, it happens on more of an unconscious level. It helps me understand, reading over the summer, I read American Dirt by Janine Cummings, and which is a story of an immigrant and family. And it really changed my emotional understanding of what it's like to come to this country illegally from Mexico, right? So I knew a lot of things factually, but I don't think that I had really felt them so deeply. And I know that book has been criticized, but for me, it really affected me emotionally. And I think anytime something changes the way that you view the world, which this book did, it's also changing your behavior in unconscious ways.
Yes. Now I would like to shift some gears towards happiness. You talk a lot about happiness. You have so many books regarding happiness. So I'm wondering that everybody wants to be happy, but what do you think people find challenging to cultivate happiness? What's really missing?
Well, I think that people really confuse happiness, which is a positive emotion, and pleasure. And the two things are really closely related, but they're not the same, right? So pleasure, meaning the feeling that we get when we have a nice meal, or we get a new cute pair of shoes, or material possession of some kind, or we have a glass of wine or something like that. That's pleasure. It activates the reward system in our brain. And that reward system triggers usually a nice big hit of dopamine, which the primary job of dopamine is related to motivation, and it creates desire. It creates momentum. It leaves us with craving for more. And the desire for more, or a craving for whatever it was, we're very familiar with this, that the pleasure of a meal doesn't last long before we want the next one, right?
Yes.
Or anything pleasurable, right? But that craving or that desire for more, that's not happiness. Now, a positive emotion, an actual positive emotion, like gratitude, or it could be contentment or passion or faith, or a sense of awe or inspiration. These are all positive emotions. Compassion and love are probably our most powerful positive emotions. These things may trigger a little bit of the reward system in the brain, but for the most part, their function physiologically is to reverse any fight or flight response. So to reduce stress, bring us back to normal and our neutral, and And we experience those positive emotions in a different part of the brain that doesn't leave us wanting more. It leaves us with more, right? We can the more positive emotion that we can foster in ourselves, the longer it will last. It doesn't come and go in such a fleeting way. So I think that Western culture has become very obsessed with pursuing happiness. And that pursuit of happiness is not really happiness. We're not really pursuing positive emotions like compassion or gratitude. We're pursuing pleasure, and it's a mistake.
How do you cultivate gratitude in your life?
So I have a lot. As a family, we've practiced gratitude a lot since my kids were really little, for the last 20 years. And so we have it kind of built into our family life, right? So dinner time, we tend to talk about what we're grateful for. Bedtime, the kids' routines when they were younger was always included 3 good things. And they would tell me 3 good things. And I will still do this with my youngest kids, even though they're older teenagers now, occasionally. And a lot of the times the kids will text me good things as they're going to sleep. But it's just like kind of built into the way our emotional habits, right? Like the way we end the day.
And you have a book on that, Raising Happiness, 10 Simple Steps for More Joyful Kids and Happier Parents.
Yeah.
Could you talk about some of the steps in brief?
Sure. I mean, one of them is to practice gratitude, right? To cultivate gratitude on a daily or weekly basis in your own life and in your family life. And I feel like it's gotten so, I wrote Raising Happiness a decade ago, and a lot of people talk about practicing gratitude. And here's the thing, it works. If what you want is to be happy, even during really difficult times, it really helps your nervous system to set aside any sort of scarcity mentality that you might have going on. Anything that you feel like you don't have enough of. You feel like you don't have enough money or enough time or enough of something, right? That scarcity mentality throws your brain into a threat mode. And I mean, I think right now we're all suffering from this scarcity mentality around certainty about the future, right? Every plan we've made for the future has exploded. And so, we feel a scarcity there. The human brain evolved to really pay attention to scarcity. Because if you didn't have enough water, you would die. If you were without other people, you would die, right? It's an evolutionary thing to keep us alive. But a hyper focus on scarcity doesn't work in the same way. It doesn't help us in the same way as it did, 10,000 years ago or more. So the practice of gratitude can really help our brains shift out of scarcity towards the perception of abundance. And it's not that we have to find abundance in the area where we feel like we have scarcity, right? We don't have to feel like we don't have enough time and then foster gratitude for how much time we have, for example. The human brain isn't quite so literal in that way. Like we can be feeling a sense of scarcity and the brain can perceive that as a threat. And then we can practice gratitude for, for the connections we have with our children, or for the great book that we're reading, or something that's going well in our lives that we feel that we have enough of. And the brain can't hold both things.
Then what can we do in that scenario? And the reason I'm asking is that we practice a lot of positive affirmations, but sometimes our self-image does not accept that.
So I think, can you give me a more specific example? Because it's an interesting example. I'd love to work with you.
If I am feeling negative or if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I know, and my mind knows that I'm overwhelmed, but I keep repeating this mantra, I'm calm, I'm calm, I'm calm. So I feel that there is some sort of resistance, some conflict inside of me. I'm trying to project that I'm calm, but internally I'm not feeling calm. But mindfulness practice will say that you repeat positive affirmations. Those are great, but I feel those resistance sometimes. It's physiological.
Yeah. So that's actually not practicing gratitude, right? That's not at all what I'm talking about. So when we feel overwhelmed, that is the sort of scarcity mentality around not having enough time or resources to get done everything that you need to get done. So that's real. So we can be mindful of that. We can sort of look at the circumstances and accept that this is a really difficult time, right? Accept the circumstances and then touch into our feelings, how we're actually feeling about it, right? Like, what does it feel like in your body to be overwhelmed and anxious and all of those things? And then after we've sort of leaned in and practiced acceptance of what is, the circumstances and your feelings about the circumstances, then we can pretty effectively turn our attention to something else. So we're not denying what is. We're not stuffing that down. We're not even trying to change what is. We set that aside, and then we look in our environment for things that are beautiful, that we appreciate, or things about other people that are also true. So we're not feeling overwhelmed and resisting the overwhelm and trying to change the overwhelm by telling ourselves we're calm. Right? Like that's just what we resist persists. That's just going to amplify the anxiety doing that. So this is not a positive affirmation or positive thinking. This is really about looking around for something that we authentically feel grateful for. So, and it could be something as simple as, a book that you're reading, or the sweet way your dog looks at you, or right now we're all feeling grateful that we've had several days in a row here in Northern California in which we can go outside because the smoke has cleared a little bit where we are anyway. And so suddenly, like, clean air is something that we just feel profoundly grateful for, right? So that has nothing to do with my overwhelm, but it does shift blood flow in my brain so that I'm better resourced to deal with the difficult circumstances when I come back to them.
Kristen, do you recommend writing about gratitude on a paper or just reminding ourselves?
Yeah, I think anytime that we take the time to write things down, it can really help our brain see the truth of them, right? And help us sort of savor or linger with any positive emotions that might come up for it. So I personally am not a big gratitude journaler. I think it's because I write for a living and I just, need a break from it. Maybe, I don't know. One size definitely doesn't fit all, right? It's important to realize that one size doesn't necessarily fit all with the gratitude practices, but there is a lot of research that shows that writing things down and being very specific about not just what you're grateful for, but also what produced the things that you're grateful for, how you got to the place of gratitude can be very effective.
I can at least verbalize right now what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for having this wonderful conversation with you, Kristen. So what are some of the small things these days you are grateful for?
Well, I just had an anniversary with my husband and he brought me flowers, and he doesn't do that very often. So I'm just like really grateful for the beautiful flowers I'm looking at right now and for the relationship that I have. This has been a hard time, but as a family, I think we've grown stronger, and I'm so grateful for that.
Well, a big congratulations to you from all of us.
Oh, well, thank you.
And I saw that you have a video presentation about full plate, empty life. What is that?
Oh, the video from Wisdom 2.0.
Could you speak on that, please?
Sure. I gave a talk for Wisdom 2.0 a few years ago, talking about how the busier we become, often the less satisfied we become with our lives, and that busyness is just a construct that can really trap us in a less fulfilling life than we can lead if we let go of some of the limiting beliefs that we have around productivity, basically.
could you give us an example about eliminating beliefs that you might have encountered with your clients or maybe in your personal life?
Yeah, absolutely. Virtually everyone in Western culture seems to believe these days that busyness is a sign of success and importance and significance, right? That sort of the time is money view of productivity and even creativity sometimes is, it's just a deeply, deeply limiting belief. Right? We know that busyness cannot be equated with actual productivity or actual significance or importance in the world. It's hard for us to believe that because we live in this world in which all the most important people seem to have the most to do. They're the ones who are always running late and busy, 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 busy. But when we look at the research around busyness is much more likely to create overwhelm and what researchers call cognitive overload than it is to actually, productivity or importance in the world. And so it's this sort of belief that if we aren't busy all the time, then we aren't doing important work, or that our lives aren't meaningful or aren't significant, that it really holds us back.
The strange thing is we all want to be busy, and it's a choice that we are making all the time. So, Kristen, you have a lot to do on your plate. So how do you manage or choose your priorities that move your life forward? Or in other words, how do you manage things? Do you have any
Yeah.
principles?
I am a big planner, and when you're living through an age of accelerated change like we are right now, and I think we will for the rest of our lifetimes, everything is changing at an exponential rate. Planning is sometimes futile in the sense that it's not about the plan, right? It's about the process of prioritization, of taking a step back and watching yourself for a moment, really evaluating what is it that we want to get done? What are the most important things? And so we've already talked about, like, I build the foundation first with exercise and stillness practices. Otherwise, because this is really difficult. Like, we are all really living in a stressful time. And so we need to have ways to reset our nervous system so that we can go into the day trying to accomplish what we want to accomplish, right? With a foundation of groundedness, and just the ability to concentrate is an issue for most people these days. So I start with that, and then I use my to-do list is actually in project planning software, which enables me to really prioritize group-like tasks together. My calendar is pretty well synced with my task list in terms of like when I'm seeing clients and when I have time blocked off to check my email, for example. I really only check my email once a day. I get all the way through it. I'm just very, very strategic about what I need to do and when I'm going to do it.
How many minutes do you spend on emails every day?
Well, I never block off more than 50 minutes. So what I don't get to during that time, I don't always spend a full 50 minutes, but if I don't get to it, I don't get to it. Now, it's a little deceiving because sometimes, like, you have an email that could take you an hour to respond to, right? Like, because it's basically a to-do item, right? so that I just forward it right into Asana, into my to-do list, and move it out of my inbox. Then it becomes something that when I'm doing my action items or like other tasks, then I'll spend more time on that. It's a little hard. I use Inbox When Ready with Gmail because it keeps me locked out of my inbox. I can't even see how many new emails I have because I'm too tempted to check that way, but I do often have to go into my email to do a task, right? I need to go into a folder and find an email that somebody sent with a form for X, Y, or Z or whatever it is, right? But I keep myself locked out of my inbox because it's just a slippery slope. So there's a tremendous amount of what looks to people like discipline from the outside, but I actually tend to just use structural solutions, right? I don't get alerts that are going to distract me. I lock myself out of my inbox so that I don't compulsively check it, because it's always easier to check your email than to do your real work, right? Especially if you're feeling stressed. So I don't rely on my own discipline. I don't have that kind of discipline. I need to reserve the discipline for my focused work and my writing, and so that I can pay attention in my client sessions and everything. Like I reserve my willpower and my focus for those things. I don't waste it on trying to resist the temptation of email or social media. Well, I don't have to resist the siren song of social media because I don't get any alerts. I only go into, my social media at designated times a couple times a week, right? And the same with email, the same with the news cycle right now. Every time my phone updates or my computers update, the alerts get reset back to sort of deliver news. And if that news gets delivered to me, right, even just in a headline, I cannot resist. I click, right? And so I just turn off the alerts.
This is so amazing that you have these great disciplines. They're
not traditional disciplines, right? It's a structural thing that I just set once. And unfortunately, you have to keep resetting them every time your computer updates or whatever, but still I know to do it. And then I don't have to use my discipline.
Do you ever feel like you're missing something in your life when you don't check emails or social media at regular intervals?
Well, I do check at regular intervals, in the sense that I do see all of my email every day. And, yes, when for a while there, I had email on my phone and I was checking it kind of compulsively. Every time I had a minute to myself, I would check it. And then you kind of do go through withdrawal. When you take it off, you're like, oh, I wonder what's happening. I wonder whatever. But then that goes away. You kind of get used to it. People know that if they need to get a hold of you, they just call you, or they know you'll get to them that day. It's not, nothing ends up being all that urgent. And you would think with 4 kids that there would be a lot of urgency in my day, but the kids have figured it out when they can get my attention. And when, and that it's so gratifying to have some space to do your actual work, right? Most white collar workers get paid to think and to help other people. And that's so much more fulfilling than just checking your email or social media or the news.
Well, I would love to tell our listeners that Kristen has a great book, Sweet Spot, that came in 2017. I read that book and it has a huge impact in my life, how to structure small disciplines, how to structure our days, routines, and all those things. So thank you, Kristen, for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I know. I feel like the Sweet Spot is having a real resurgence right now as everybody's routines have changed, right? Because, people are working from home and not seeing as many people. And, even people who are still going into work, their routines have changed. If they have kids that are home or whatever, everything has changed. So my best advice is to overhaul your routines totally thoroughly so that it fits the life that you actually have, not the life you used to have or the life that you wish you had right now. I think we're going to be in this for a while longer.
Yes.
And settle in. It won't be wasted effort.
If somebody is dealing with meltdown or emotional setbacks these days, do you have any advice to handle meltdown for some of those people?
Well, yeah, first, you're normal. Everybody's who's not dealing with emotional meltdowns? The people who are really suppressing emotion, probably. No, but so it's normal. And there's help out there, right? Find a therapist. Now you can work with therapists from all over the country because of teletherapy is really actually turning out to be a great blessing for us. So if you find that you're just falling apart get help. Human beings need emotional support, and coaches and therapists can really provide skillful emotional support, and coaches can really provide a path forward for us in terms of helping you create the structures that you need so that everything doesn't feel so overwhelming all the time.
And what kind of emotional support system do you have in your personal life?
Oh, I have, my closest friend is a type of therapist. So that is like a twofer. Right? We like go for hikes together on the weekends, and she's very emotionally supportive. And so I have friends. I've got a coach myself. I've got, I have a wide net of people that I can call on. And it's important, I think, to have more than one person. I'm seeing a lot of marriages that are really strained right now because we tend to just turn to our spouse and expect them to be everything to us. Now there are like primary social life and emotional support and practical support and everything. And, the chances are that they're struggling too. And like no single human being can hold another one up. So to spread the wealth, so to speak.
Yes. And now, could you talk about your new book, The New Adolescence, Raising Happy and Successful Teens?
Yes, this book, Raising Happy and Successful Teens in an Age of Anxiety and Distraction, has turned out to be rather prescient in these times. I wrote it before the pandemic, but what we thought were anxious and distracting times before, we're now seeing that was nothing. So it's a book that is it's written for parents. It's not really written for the teens themselves, although I've gotten a lot of feedback that parents are like, you need to read the chapter on marijuana. So sorry to all the teens out there that are getting that kind of instruction. But the first part is really about the foundations of understanding adolescence and how to interact with your teenager, right? So, and it's not really teenager, it's really adolescence. So like preteens, early middle school through college, really, and just like through age 25. So adolescence is a very long decade, but I think it's really important for parents to understand how to influence a teenager or an adolescent, how to help them when they're struggling, what types of language really is supportive, how to get them to do the things you want them to do without having them reject it outright. And then the book also has several chapters in it that are just sort of like talking points for a new era. So the sort of new sex talk, the drugs and alcohol talk, what kids need to know about money and how parents influence it, those sorts of things.
Have you had your children read this book?
I've tried to get them to read it. They've heard it all. They're such guinea pigs, right? Everything has been, so the book is all science-based, but it's all been road tested on them and then on my clients' kids. And it's very well tested given that I've raised 4 teenagers.
What do you specifically tell your children to be happy?
What do I specifically tell them to be happy? You know what? I don't tell them to be happy. And I've been doing this work since before they were born. So they know what kind of work I do. My goal as a parent is just to model doing the things that we need to do to have a fulfilling life. And my expectation is not that we'll be happy all the time, but I do think that we can find meaning in even the most difficult circumstances. And that leads to a sense of fulfillment and well-being that is so much more important than any short-term happiness.
Speaking of meaning and purpose, what's your most critical need in upcoming months and years?
My most critical need?
Yes.
Well, I think it's always social connection, right? Because I'm a human being. I think that if we look at the research for the last 150 years in every field on well-being, what we know is that social connection is the best predictor of a person's well-being and sometimes even health. So I think that that's my highest priority and my greatest need.
Well, Kristen, before I ask you my last question, I would love to ask you that what's the impact you want to leave on this world?
Well, I would really like to see us restructure the way that we work. I think that we are stuck in the factory model when much of our economy has changed so dramatically. And so all of the people out there that are working from home or that work from tech companies understand that everything has changed and that overwork is not going to get us anywhere, get us where we want to go anyway. So I'm always looking to help people. And I really, really want people to lead joyful and productive and meaningful lives. And I hope that that is the impact that I
love it. Where can our listeners find you online, Kristen?
My website, ChristineCarter.com.
That's it?
ChristineCarter.com. Yeah. I read a column for Greater Good magazine and an advice column. So if you need advice, but you can find it all on ChristineCarter.com.
Yes, I will put all the links in the show notes. I thought this would be my last question, but my last question is last but not the least. Do you have any favorite quote? Because I found so many quotes on your Instagram page. So do you have any favorite quote?
Do I have a favorite quote? You should just read. Those are my favorite quotes. I know I do. My Instagram, and believe it or not, I'm like constantly deleting quotes that I put up on Instagram because my kids criticize me for having too many quotes up there. But the one that what I think about a lot is what the caterpillar calls the end, the world calls a butterfly. Like, I think that is a nice quote for all of us to kind of hold in our hearts as we experience as we live through this time of really accelerated change.
Thank you so much, Kristen. It was so wonderful talking to you. My pleasure.
It was my pleasure as well.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode today. If you did enjoy this, please subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, or you can visit https://nishantgarg.me, NISHANTGARG.me. You can also share this episode with your loved ones to help them live a fulfilled life. You are not alone in this journey. We all struggle in life. There is no shame in talking about it. I go through my highs and lows. I get depressed, and these practices help me in living a resilient life. You can also do this. You got this. Don't judge yourself. You are doing the best you can. And thank you so much again.